I fucking hate mosquitoes. Oh my God. And I feel like they're always in my house.
It's the last thing I want sucking on me.
Exactly. And they take your blood. I mean, if someone's going to be sucking on me, I need a vampire, you know?
At least be sexy about it.
Hmm. I mean, maybe I'll die afterwards. Maybe I'll turn into a vampire. I don't know exactly how that works, but anyway.
Better than malaria, either way.
Yes, yes. Or they have in the Dominican Republic this thing called dengue, dengue, and I think it's kind of like malaria-ish. You know, you
I've
get
heard of
it and
that.
you, yeah, yeah, it's gross. I mean, I've never gotten it down there, but I'm sure I will at some point.
Just the crabs, right?
Yeah, exactly. How are you?
I'm okay. I don't I have some sort of seasonal thing right now with allergies but I felt really fatigued for the past week and I've taken lots of naps, which I never do. I'm not a
Mm,
napper.
really? I love
Yeah.
naps.
In the past 2 nights I've gone to bed at 8:30.
Oh my gosh, that's so
Yeah.
early. So yeah, you definitely have something going on for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
It's too bad your three hints, one of them wasn't Xanax, because that one I could get on board with today.
Exactly. Well, I can say the three hints, but shall we intro first?
Oh yeah, should we like actually start this thing?
Yeah.
Allow me, please.
Okay.
Welcome back. I'm Blake Roberts.
And I'm Amanda Kamada, and this is Forbidden. So Blake is killing mosquitoes or attempting to. He might or may not have malaria. Maybe you have malaria. You've got the mosquitoes all
Oh my
around you.
god, maybe I do.
Oh my God. I mean, I know that I'm not a doctor, but I do play one on TV, and I will say that there is a chance that you could have malaria right now. I think that's a thing, you know.
Who needs ZocDoc? I've got Amanda and a glass of
Exactly.
wine.
Yeah, I mean, that would be my prescription for you, that Xanax and a glass of wine.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I've had a week. I got to tell you, I'm so excited that we finally got the dog. She arrived, yay, on Sunday night slash Monday early morning. Really, it was supposed to be Sunday night, but she came on a charter type flight, so I think sometimes those can be delayed for various reasons and stuff like that. And then when she got here, she had to clear customs, and it was just a total like time suck. And I'm like out there picking her up in this cargo place, like outside the airport in the middle of the night. I'm by myself. There's barely anyone working there. So it felt really fucking creepy, to be honest with you. Like, I'm like, something could happen to me out here and nobody would ever know because it's out by the airport. It's this industrial area where they're unloading cargo, and putting it onto trucks and stuff like that. I mean, I was just, yeah. It was a little creepy being out there, but I got her, and she's great. She's getting along with Bodega awesomely. No fights yet, no accidents in the house yet. So, but I guess this is as good a time as any to reintroduce or review the three hints that I gave on our last episode as to what I'm going to cover today.
Yeah.
The three were Canadian, swimsuit model, and Encino, California. And
Nice.
I've decided today to pair that with a wine. Now, it's an Australian red wine, but it's called Leonardo RD, which always makes me think of the Dominican Republic because it's called República Dominicana down there. And because I got Helena this week, I cheersing to that with my red wine. Canadian, I personally used to almost be Canadian because I lived in Seattle for 12 years. So myself is a pairing. And then also I'm wearing a It's hard to tell. A strapless black bikini this evening. It almost looks like I'm wearing nothing if I sit a certain way. I'm not topless, or am I? I'm not sure. I mean, who knows? But that goes with the swimsuit model portion of my story today. And black
Yeah.
because it's a sad story. Yeah. So should I get started with my stories tonight story tonight after we cheers?
Yeah, I'm curious to know all about Encino and Canada, plus the
Yeah.
swimsuit thing.
Yeah.
All right,
All right.
cheers.
Cheers.
Clink.
So this story is very near and dear to my heart because I don't have anything to do with it, except for the fact that I really love the person that this happened to. And I will get more into it at the end as to why, like, I did the story, because it's kind of an homage to this person. So on May 28th, 1998 at 6:20 a.m., police in Encino, California received a 911 call from an unidentified caller who provided them an address and said that a man had been killed in the house, that the killer was still in the home and likely armed, and that he and two children were also in the home at the time. So this 911 call comes in at 6:20 in the morning from this man. And from what I was watching, I'll give my sources at the end, it didn't seem that he identified himself at that point. Or if he did, like, there wasn't a connection as to why he would have been at the house. So police were immediately dispatched to the home address in the quiet neighborhood, where they immediately recognized it was the home of famous comedian and actor Phil Hartman.
Got it.
Upon entering the home, they quickly ushered the two young children and man out of the home and went upstairs to a room where the door was locked, and they heard a woman sobbing and speaking incoherently within minutes before they could secure the entire home. Because at this point, they're like, okay, is this a woman who is in a room with a dead person and there's like another killer there, who has her hostage or something like that? So they're trying to secure the home, get like the man and two kids out of the home. But while they were doing that, before they could get into the room, they heard another gunshot. After breaking through the door, they discovered two bodies in the bed, one of them being Phil Hartman and another a woman they presumed to be his wife, Bryn. A door leading to the outside of the bedroom to a balcony was open, so police were not sure at this time if it was a murder-suicide, or what was going on. So thus the investigation began. So that's sort of how the 911 call went in the initial steps that were taken before they discovered that he was dead, along with someone else that they presumed to be his wife. So I don't know which of our listeners are familiar with Phil Hartman, so I will get into this a little bit. Phil Hartman was an actor and comedian with a prolific career, famous for his co-creation and role as the genie on Pee-wee's Playhouse. So that's something that I knew he was on Pee-wee's Playhouse, but I did not know that he was a co-creator with Paul Rubin. And he actually came up with the character of Pee Wee Herman for him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
I didn't know that either until I read this book. I had no clue. I knew he was on Pee Wee's Playhouse, but
Yeah.
I didn't, which was a genius show, by the way. Like,
So
honestly.
good.
Yeah.
I can rewatch it. It's so nostalgic. What was it? He was the sailor, right? Phil Hartman on the TV show. He played the sailor.
Oh, he played the sailor. That's right. The genie was played by someone else. I'm thinking of something else.
Yeah, but
I'm
that
probably
guy's
thinking of a
right.
Saturday Night Live sketch, actually, because not only did he do this Pee Wee's Playhouse, obviously, he was very well known for his sketches on Saturday Night Live, doing impressions of celebrities like Frank Sinatra, Phil Donahue. He was amazing at Bill Clinton, and in addition to other like recurring characters and stuff like that during his 8 seasons on the show. In my opinion, when he was on, there were probably some of the best years of Saturday Night Live. He was with such a great cast, with like Kevin Nealon and Dennis Miller, who's kind of gone off the rails now. But it was just like Dana Carvey, it was just like in the heyday of SNL, like in the late 80s, early to mid 90s that he was on the show. And it said executive producer Lorne Michaels, so he's the executive producer, obviously, of Saturday Night Live, said that he was nicknamed Glue on the show because he held the show together. He gave to everybody and demanded very little. He was very low maintenance. He was also known for his voice acting appearances on The Simpsons.
I just Googled that while you were
Yeah.
talking. He played, he did a voice for several characters, but I always remember him as Troy McClure.
Yes.
So funny.
Yes. And
It's
at the
such a
time,
distinctive voice.
such a distinctive voice and delivery. Like
Yeah.
his comedic delivery is just like, for me, one of the best that I've ever seen. So he did the voice acting, and at the time of his death, he was an acclaimed actor on the NBC hit sitcom NewsRadio,
Hmm.
and had recently received an Emmy nomination for this role. I remember him on NewsRadio, and the thing is that he was already pretty famous in his own right with doing Pee-wee's Playhouse and Saturday Night Live, but when he got this sitcom that like was a hit on NBC and played like this amazing role on the show where he was Emmy nominated, like his career, even though he had been around for a while, was just about to start skyrocketing at this point. He was being, because I read an interview that someone did with him, and he was like, I've never been like the star of the show, or, I've always been one in the background, but he was, or the second in line. He was like, but that always was okay with me, because if the show failed, it wasn't going to be all on my shoulders. So
Yeah.
he was kind of that kind of guy. So he did some work on some movies, including Jingle All the Way, and did other voiceovers for like Dennis the Menace and stuff like that. So a little about Phil before his success. He was born in 1948. He was a Canadian actor and one of Doris and Rupert Hartman's 8 children. He joked in an interview that being a middle child motivated him to become a comedian and actor. Quote, I suppose I didn't get what I wanted out of my family life, so I started seeking love and attention elsewhere. That was a quote that he did for CBS News, which I think a lot of actors and comedians kind of do, because it's like they have to make themselves stand out in their family. So they just start, doing things like sketches and, plays and those sorts of things. I used to do that a lot when I was a kid. We did a lot of plays. I don't know if you did, but
I did
like
other
like
things.
we wrote our own plays, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I was also in plays, but nothing of note. I mean, I grew up in a town of 8,000 people. How good could the theater have been? Okay, so they were from Canada, but they eventually moved from their home in Canada to the East Coast, briefly living in Maine and Connecticut before putting down roots in California. After graduating from Westchester High School, he was enrolled in college, like briefly at Santa Monica City College, but he dropped out and worked as a roadie for various rock bands. And it was during this time that he also appeared on the dating game show,
That's
where
amazing.
he was on an episode of the dating game, like in the early 70s or something like that, and actually won the dating game show that he was on, which doesn't surprise me. He later, so at this time, he's not working in television at all. He later returned to college, received a degree in graphic design at California State University, Northridge, and he put his degree to work. He designed album covers for bands like Crosby, Stills, and Nash. So what an interesting guy, right?
Yeah. What a cool life.
I know. So so he was married 3 times. First to Gretchen Lewis in 1970. They were married for 2 years. He then married real estate agent Lisa Strain in 1982. So about 10 years later, he got married again, and their marriage lasted 3 years. But she said in an interview to People magazine that Hartman was reclusive off screen and, quote, would emotionally disappear. He'd be in his own world. That passivity made you crazy. So obviously he was one of those people who, as he was getting more famous and stuff like that, was incredibly talented and very beloved by everyone that he worked with. But he must have had some sort of, it sounds like he was like completely emotionally unavailable. and not that that's a bad thing, but it totally sounds like somebody that I would go for.
Right? So the first two were a bust. What's that old quote?
Third
Third
time's a
time,
charm.
I was going to say third time does harm.
Well, that's going to be the case here because after he got divorced in 1987, he married former swimsuit model and aspiring actress Bryn Dahl. She was born Vicky Jo Dahl in 1958 in like Minnesota. So she was one of these gals who grew up tall, blonde, really pretty, did some modeling while she was in like, high school or whatever, moves out to LA, tries to be an actor and model, and had, moderate success as like a swimsuit model or something like that. So he met her actually on a blind date, and they eventually married. They had 2 children, but it says the marriage had difficulties. She was reportedly intimidated by his success and was frustrated that she could not find her own success. And so that was a point of, tension in their marriage. But even though that was there, it wasn't enough for them to get a divorce. He actually tried to get her acting roles. And I saw in one particular documentary about him, like even once for one of his intros to Saturday Night Live when they were filming the intros for a season, they had him seated at like a table talking to a woman, and the woman isn't facing the camera, obviously, because it's supposed to look like he's on a date. Well, later I found out that that was actually her, and he got her, sort of that sit in role, but that she was like a problem on set because they wouldn't let her turn her face because the shot is supposed to be all about him, right? So this is the kind of thing where you can see that she was clearly, struggling and trying to create a success for herself and getting immensely jealous of his success.
Yikes.
Yeah. So he tried to get her acting roles, but she became reliant on alcohol and narcotics and actually went to rehab a few times. And it said on multiple occasions he removed their children from the household to stay with like somewhere else because of her outbursts whenever she was, on drugs or alcohol, which, obviously can happen. Like to, I think to outsiders, because he hid everything so well, like nobody knew that this kind of stuff was going on. I mean, like if they were out in public or something like that. There was a quote from a bartender at Buca de Beppo where they used to go and hang out, which I
Oh
find
my
so
gosh.
crazy given that he was like so famous. It's like the last place that I would go. But I
I
guess
know.
when you're in Encino, that's like a suburb. Like I'm sure like I mean, this is in the 90s too. So I can't imagine that there were that many like elegant restaurants out in Encino. It was probably like a lot of chains and stuff like that.
I hope Pauly Shore was hanging out at Buca de Beppo as well.
Right. But the bartender said in a quote to People magazine, they always held hands and laughed and seemed like they were having a good time. But people who were close to them, who were interviewed after all of this happened, said that there was a lot of tension in their marriage due to her drug and alcohol use. Just him being the way that he is and her jealousy towards pretty much everything. She was reported to have been jealous and often verbally and physically abusive. She actually sent a letter to his ex wife, his second wife, and said that she would rip her eyes out if she spoke to him again. And apparently it got so bad, he considered retiring to try to save his marriage just to, like stop the success and stuff like that. I
Wow.
don't know if you watched Saturday Night Live, but there was a gal on there. She's since passed away. Her name is Jan Hooks.
I love Jan Hooks.
Yeah.
Love Jan
The
Hooks.
Sweeney sisters. Oh my
Oh my God, the
God.
Sweeney sisters. And then, sorry, I have to talk about this for just a minute.
Yeah.
Because also another connection to Phil Hartman, Pee Wee's Big Adventure. She
Yes.
played, there's that mosquito, it's back. Got it.
Nice.
She played the tour guide at the Alamo. And one of my
Oh,
favorite
that's
lines,
right.
Buenos dias, y'all. Um, and then one of her last roles, she played Verna, which is my mother's name. She played Verna on 30 Rock, which
Oh,
is the mother to Jane Krakowski's character.
yes.
And she's like white trash from Florida, and she is hysterical.
I've
She's
got to
one of the
watch.
best guest characters on 30 Rock. So
Yeah.
good. Verna.
Yeah. Well, apparently they had a very close relationship at work, she and Phil Hartman. And because of this, his wife on occasion said that they were married on some other level. And apparently she had written threatening letters to Hooks, warning her not to get close to her husband, but they appeared to have never been sent. They were discovered in her belongings following her death. So this woman was not only, suffering from alcohol and drug addiction, like not consistently, like, or constantly, I would say, like she had several stints in rehab, so clearly something's going on there. And then all of these things are happening, which obviously weren't, I guess none of them were like serious enough for anyone to think that like something this crazy could happen. But several of his friends didn't approve, and basically they interviewed friends of hers, and one of them said, quote, she'd admitted a couple of episodes when she'd fallen off the wagon. I remember her saying she didn't want to be an addict. So definitely an unstable person. So on the night of his death, or on the, actually, it was not the night of his death, on the evening before his death, excuse me, she went and actually had a drink with a friend at Buca de Beppo, who told People magazine that at the time she was in a good frame of mind. It would be like you and I meeting out for drinks. However, something must have happened between the time that she had drinks and went home from Buca de Beppo, because whenever she returned to the home that she shared with, Phil, they got into an argument over her drug usage. So clearly she had probably been doing cocaine and drinking alcohol that night, and so that is the argument that turned deadly. And she shot her husband 3 times. So she shot him 3 times, once in the chest, twice in the head, with a 38 caliber handgun, while their children were in the house. After she killed him, so keep in mind, she killed him. Her kids are asleep, I guess, in the home. She goes to another friend's home. His name was Ron Douglas, inebriated, distraught, coked up, and she confessed her murder to him. But he didn't believe her. So he was just like, no, no, you've got to be, like you're not right. Like you couldn't have done, like basically you couldn't have done that. Like there's no way that you could have done that. And she agreed to go back to the house with him, and she led him to the bedroom where he was shot. And as soon as he realized that Phil was dead in the bed, he like ran out and called 911. And so he was the one who actually made the call. So by the time the police got to the house, they found the couple's young children, 9 and 6 at the time, unharmed. And they got him and this Ron guy out of the house. And then they were found dead in the couple's bedroom with, and after an investigation, figure out that it was in fact a murder suicide. So she killed him and then went to her friend's house, who came and discovered him about 3 hours later.
So,
So
quick question.
yeah, it's
During
kind
this
of
time,
confusing.
well, it's not confusing. I'm following it, but I'm just curious. During that time, is when he calls the police, is he with the kids?
I think
Do you
so,
know?
yes. Hmm.
Oh. Do we know how old the kids were at this time?
6 and 9.
6 and 9. Oh,
Yeah. 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 So they must not have heard it, like the
I hope
kids, because
not.
yeah, because otherwise you would think that there would be screaming kids like in the home or something like that. But the police figured out that it was in fact a murder suicide. A toxicology report said that her alcohol content was like 0.12%, and then she had traces of cocaine and Zoloft in her system. So, given the fact that she was on Zoloft doing cocaine and, intoxicated, I think all three of those played a role. And
Mm.
what's kind of crazy is that, like, he had been dead for a while. So basically what happened was, like, the police, finally heard that shot, kicked down the door and saw what had happened. And then they realized that he had been dead for a while, whereas she had not. So the comedy world obviously was just devastated, because of this. But what's interesting is that her brother actually filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Pfizer, who's the manufacturer of Zoloft, with regards to this. And her child psychiatrist, who had provided samples of antidepressants to her. So I don't know if these were like legally even prescribed to her, or if they were just kind of giving it to her on the side. And that was settled as a separate lawsuit. It was settled, but like they didn't disclose like what the settlement was or anything like that. But I believe her parents, or excuse me, the gal's sister, I think, ended up raising their children for them and that sort of thing.
Mm.
So basically, after all of this, it just, it was just such a crazy thing. And the comedy world took it so crazily. Like, even, do you know who John Lovitz is from
Uh-huh.
Saturday
Yeah.
Night Live? Yeah.
Yeah.
So apparently he after all of this happened, ran into Andy Dick, who was one of his co-stars in NewsRadio and a total cokehead in his own right, and accused him of providing like cocaine to her, or getting her back on, that sort of thing, because they had that tie through NewsRadio.
That's
Um,
crazy.
yeah. So there's nothing that said that he actually did that, but total loss. I mean, I think the guy was brilliant. I think he's probably one of my favorite comedians and actors of all time. I just feel like so robbed in a way to not be able to see like a full breadth of work from, his 40s, which was when he passed away, to like even now. I think he's kind of one of those people who could have really like continued evolving in roles, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And there are a few actors that really have the talent so they can act in anything and make it better, but just because they're in it.
Right.
Like
Right.
just the personalities sort of shines through,
Mm-hmm.
and he's one of those people for
Yeah.
me.
And he always played like unlikable characters. You know what I mean?
But somehow still
but
likable.
but but somehow like you just absolutely love them because
Yeah.
he's just so bad that you can't not love him, or
Yeah.
he's so annoying
Hmm.
that you just can't help yourself.
Yeah. That was good. I had I obviously knew that story, but I never knew all the details. Like I
Hmm.
knew that the wife did it and
Yeah.
that she had issues, but I never knew the details.
I was completely gutted when this happened. Like, I remember it happening. I remember watching the news one night, and I was in college. And I remember sitting in front of my television and it came on like NBC News or something like that. And I was just like, holy fucking shit, like what happened. And I had hoped, like, because a lot of comedians do have issues and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, please not make it be a suicide. Like, that was my first thing, is I was like, oh my God, I hope he didn't have like problems like that. I mean, because even like someone like Kate Spade committed suicide. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like these people who you just like would not think, to ever do that. And
Yeah.
then when it like came out that it was this murder suicide, I was just like, I'm not an emotional person, but I like got really, really upset about it. I mean, it just
Yeah.
felt like such a waste.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, yeah. So anyway, I've always had
98.
I've always had like a thing for him. He was probably one of my first daddy crushes, honestly.
I always thought he was handsome too.
Yeah.
I did. And I think at that time, I would have been 16,
Hmm.
and I watched The Simpsons religiously. So that was my first thought. Like, obviously, I knew him from Saturday Night Live as well, but
Hmm.
to me, he will always be Troy McClure.
That's so funny because for me, like, it makes me think of like, I mean, when I was like in middle school or like junior high, whenever I wasn't like old enough to like go out, or like have a car or anything like that, like I would sit at home on Saturday nights and like watch Saturday Night Live, and I would be like on the phone with one of my friends and we'd be like watching it together. Because it's like, well, it's basically like what we're doing right now, so we couldn't do it like in person.
Right.
you so I basically be sitting on the phone and we'd be watching television together, and it would be like, it was just hysterical. I fucking loved that cast. It was amazing. And I
Yeah.
loved NewsRadio too. It was like one of my favorite shows,
I never
along with
watched
like
News
Seinfeld
Radio.
and stuff. It's really good. Yeah.
Hmm.
There are Maura Tierney's in it. She's a really good actor. There's a guy that was in, oh God, a Canadian sketch comedy show that was in it. Andy Dick was in it. So, yeah, it was a really good cast. It was a good show if you ever have like a reason to want to go back and watch like some old 90s sitcom. I'd actually recommend it.
David Foley. He's the Canadian.
Yeah. From Kids in the Hall. That's what he's
Yes.
from.
David
Yeah.
Foley. Yeah.
Yeah.
Currently, at the time of this recording, the show is streaming on Pluto and Roku.
Oh, awesome.
Pluto is available to me. Maybe I'll watch that.
Now I'm
Review.
going to go back and watch it. So,
Oh, I know these people. Oh my God, Joe Rogan is on it.
yeah. Like this show, it actually survived without him because, like, when his character had to be taken out because of his death, I think they built it into this plot line or the storyline that he had died of a heart attack, a sudden heart attack or something like that. But watching the episode that they had to do after he passed away and covering his passing within like the script of the show, how touched they were. And I mean, it was so sad because you knew that like every tear was like genuine. They were not acting. It
Yeah.
was very, very moving. And then the show actually did pretty well for a while after they brought in somebody else. I can't remember who. I'm gonna have to look that up. Do a little more investigating on that. But
So,
anyway, I won't go too far. Like anybody, like Google like him doing Bill Clinton, and it is fucking amazing.
yeah,
Like
that was always good.
he was so good, so good.
For our listeners, where can they follow us and do all that fun stuff?
They can follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook at The Forbidden Pod. Also, we are posting episodes on our website, theforbiddenpod.com. And if you have anything to write in about, please do so. We'd love to hear any of your shame, any of your story ideas at hello@theforbiddenpod.com.
And remember to continue listening and please rate and review on Spotify or Apple or both.
Yes. Well, thank you for listening to my story today.
Thank you
And
for telling me your story.
yeah, I thought that was it was a fun one. It wasn't a fun one to tell, but it was one that I've been wanting to tell for a
Near and
while.
dear. Yeah.
Yeah, little near and dear. Oh, I didn't put any of my sources in, but it was like People Magazine, interviews with NBC, CBS, and I read a book. It's out and it's been out for a while. You can get it on Amazon. It's called You Might Remember Me, The Life and Times of Phil Hartman. So it was a really good book. Yeah, so check it out on Amazon. You're welcome, Amazon. for that one sale that you're going to do.
This episode sponsored by Amazon. Just kidding.
Just kidding. All right. Well, thank you once again. And listeners, thank you.
Thank you.